Welcome to episode 55 of the Cohesive Home podcast. I'm Melissa Reisenhoover, and in today's episode, my co-host Kate Saffel chats with Whitney English, business strategist and creator of the famed Day Designer. And if you've been around this podcast long enough, you know Kate and I love us some planners. During their chat, Whitney shares with Kate about one of her newest ventures, H.E.A.R.T goals, a goal-setting method for creating a life you love. They also talk about living intentionally, failure, and how to better organize your days. I think you'll love this episode. Take it away, Kate.
Hey, Whitney. Welcome to the Cohesive Home podcast. I am so glad to have you joining us today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, absolutely. You know, after we met at a local networking event where you spoke, I just knew that you would be such a great fit for our audience. And I think this is going to be just such a treat for them to hear about your projects and the good work that you're putting out in the world. So would you be willing to tell our listeners a little bit about you and your story?
Sure. I'm Whitney English. I have been an entrepreneur since 2002. I was 22 years old when I started my first business, and it was awesome and wonderful until it wasn't. So I've done some of the hard work of reframing a failure in my story as a learning experience. So when that company closed, I started another business, a planner company actually called Day Designer. A lot of people know me from that because the product is in Target and has been in Anthropology and has received a lot of national press and exposure. And it's been super fun. I can talk more about that later on. But more importantly, I am a wife and a mom to 3 kids, ages 9, 8, and 6 right now.
Wow. Yeah, so you have a lot going on.
I think we all do, in
Right.
fairness. But yeah, the days are busy.
Yeah, which I think is why I was also so attracted to having you on the show, is because I think that your life experiences, as well as having created a planner, is just so valuable for our audience, you know, because I think many of our listeners are in a similar stage of life.
Yeah, and I hope I try to share my story as openly as possible without being awkwardly vulnerable, and I hope it encourages people.
Yes, I'm sure it will. So I would love to hear more about how you got into planning and then what drew you to creating your own planner.
So back after that first business closed, or while it was crumbling right before my very eyes, it was right. Let's see what year it was, like 2012, and we basically just didn't. We survived so long after the 2008 crash and recession, and we had just gotten to the point where, with technology shifts and things like that, we just couldn't make it through that. And right about that time, I was really reflecting on my life and trying to take stock of what went wrong and where, because I think that's, like, if we can pull lessons out of negative experiences, that's sort of a discipline and a practice that I try to apply in life. Is, what can I learn from this? It just makes the painful stuff more bearable. So it was this really painful time. I'm reflecting, and there were a lot of things that went wrong. But if I was going to take personal ownership of some of those things, one of those things was that I had just been disorganized, and maybe I had made some less than desirable choices along the way. But I remember looking at my desk one day, and I had sticky notes and little pieces of paper everywhere. And in the opposite corner of my office on a table was a pile of dusty planners that had not worked. And I think it was, I think it was that very day that I got in the car and I drove to Staples and I stood in their planner aisle and tried to find something else that worked. Despite the fact that there was already a dusty pile of planners in the corner of my office, it was, how do I did, those aren't working. Where is something that works? And I could not find anything. And I started drawing grid lines on a piece of paper and playing around with just different formats and trying to, and at some point in time in this process over, weeks that followed, and I actually ended up working on the whole layout for over 2 years before debuting it. But at some point in time, the light bulb came on that there was nothing that had a to-do list and a schedule side by side. And that's what I needed. So, and I'm big on, if it's, I don't ever want to reinvent a wheel. But when you come across something that hasn't yet been invented, I don't know, as an entrepreneur, that it's just like, oh my gosh, the world needs this. It got really exciting after that.
Yeah, it's so tempting to just jump in and put your own spin on things, for sure. Well, and that's what I love about your planner, that it has that side-by-side view, because I find so many day planners or even weekly ones, the spots to write your appointments and what you have, it's so tiny. And I'm like, is it just me? Do I write really big, or is this planner just not designed for what I need? And so I think that's so neat that you saw a need both in your own life and in the market, and you were able to meet that.
Yeah, thanks. It was so fun. I don't write really big, but I love to have like space in my, white space. Everything needs room to breathe, even my letters and words. And so that was definitely one of the elements that we incorporated, was just larger line spacing. And at the time the only planner, and I didn't even know this, but the only planner on the market whenever we debuted Day Designer that had that side-by-side format was kind of the Franklin Covey stuff, but there wasn't anything else out there like it. So it was an interesting trying to figure out how to fit 365 days into something that people could carry around was pretty challenging.
Right. It's, you didn't want to send them home with a giant brick, that would be weighing down their purses.
Right. Here's a phone book.
Right. Yeah. Kind of like the first cell phones, like a shoebox.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and what year was that it debuted?
2012, right 2012. Before, my old company was closing, and I was pregnant with my daughter, and it was a crazy year, but that's the year it debuted.
Isn't that? I feel like that's how it goes. I think that there's like this creative energy that comes through when you're pregnant, or you're adding a new one to your home, and I don't know. It can lead to some really neat, right? Yeah. I don't know how to explain it, but yeah, I definitely feel like there's like some kind of creative energy. So, so you're working on a newer project, and it's now the H.E.A.R.T goals. How long has that been in the works? And if you could tell us a little bit more about that, because that's what I'm really excited about.
Oh, I am so excited about it. Well, I'm writing a book about it right now, and it's an e-course as well. We launch it at different times throughout the year. We currently don't have another launch date on the schedule just yet, because we're having to work with potential publishers on some timing things. So we just don't know yet when the e-course will relaunch. But it's super. The rumblings of H.E.A.R.T goals started around the same time as it all sort of came from this reflection that I was doing after this failed company. And one of the things I did was I was looking at my goals, and a light bulb went off one day, and I realized that all of my goals were business related, that I didn't have any relationship goals for my kids, family stuff, that even our personal finance like financial goals were not really being addressed. And I had been using the SMART method of goal setting, which a lot of people have heard about, so I won't go into that. And there were some holes in that method. I just was like, this is not working. My goals are very arbitrary. I'm using the world's definition of success to decide what needs to be on my goal list. And, something's got to change. So I started playing around with different types of goal setting processes, systems, methods at that point in time. And at some point, it's definitely been an evolution. And first I identified, these 5 categories of life. And then I realized that the order of the categories mattered. And then I realized that there are 5 subcategories in the H.E.A.R.T goals method. And as opposed to just saying like, oh, here are a bunch of goals, and I need to make sure that each of these goals falls into alignment with these specific things. That's what SMART does. It just says each of your goals have to be these 5 things. But H.E.A.R.T goals says you really only need 5 goals, and they're based on your needs. So it's a needs-based way of looking at goal setting instead of an outcome-based perspective. So you sort of start with like, what do you need as a human, instead of what do I want? Like, what is the world telling me I'm supposed to have? Where am I supposed to end up in life? And it's really about asking yourself what the next right thing is, as opposed to where do I want to end up in life? But it's amazing how when we focus on the daily stuff and what we need to be doing for ourselves and for the people around us, how we're going to end up where we want to end up anyway. So it's a very different perspective, and that's why I'm so excited about the book, because it's going to take a lot of explaining.
Yeah. Well, and when I heard you speak on it, I was just completely blown away by how you organized the way that we should approach our goals, and then the emphasis on meeting our needs and meeting our needs first. I mean, that was kind of like the base level. And right. I feel like that's just such a different approach. Because I'm in this business sphere where you hear so much about like the hustle and the, like just grind it out, just get it done. And for women who are also mothers, it's like, no, we have homes, we have our families, we have so much more, and our lives are so much richer than just focusing on those outcomes, those kind of like arbitrary business outcomes. So like, I love how holistic this is and how it really does come from the heart.
Yeah. And I think it's time. I remember even 5-6 years ago feeling really guilty if I got on social media and I, as an entrepreneur, if I talked about something besides my work or besides business. I think I read a statistic the other day that something like 82%, maybe I can find it. I feel like it was in a book that I was using for research. But it's an extremely high percentage of moms that are working. And I felt if I was on social media as an entrepreneur, but not talking about work. And I think that's changing slowly. I think it's becoming more and more accepted to showcase your balance, I guess, in a way. Not like we want to do that, but our personalities are so diverse, and it's, when we talk about social media being a highlight reel for people, I want to give people permission to take care of themselves without guilt, and take care of their people without guilt, and talk about mental health issues without stigma. And the only way we're ever going to do that is if we kind of quit glorifying this like entrepreneurial world that was causing me so much struggle 5 years ago. I think I just said everything I was trying to say.
Yes. Amen to all of that. Okay, so that kind of leads into my next question about women and our self-talk and our limiting beliefs. I mean, do you think that some of that is ties into social media and how that makes us feel, or where do you think the self-talk and limiting beliefs come from?
Yeah. I was actually just writing about this before we hopped on this podcast. The I mean, we live in a capitalist society and love it. You know, I'm an entrepreneur, but the way marketers get us to buy products is by agitating problems in our lives. If the billboards said you are enough, we would not be prompted to buy products. It just this idea of, you know, like we are enough, we are capable, we are acceptable. We have everything we need right now to do what needs to be done is just not what our society screams at us. It's the exact opposite. So we're constantly being bombarded by these messages that we're not enough in order to prompt us to buy someone's products. And I do think I think that's where comparison starts. I do think social media plays into that. I mean, even influencers. I mean, when someone, you know, I'm sure you follow the people that are like, I just got these new jeans and here's how I like them. Um, I'm finding that more and more of us have those people, those influencer people that we follow, and we buy what they recommend. And so of course we're sort of going to compare ourselves to that. And it's so hard. I don't think I'm specifically answering the question, but that's where the limiting beliefs and the negative self-talk really starts, I think, is this contrast. And it's unintentional at first. It's, you know, marketers aren't trying to actually make our lives miserable, but they have to create that contrast in order to, they have to sort of facilitate that need in our lives in order to get us to purchase. And so I think it starts there. And I'm still, the way to counteract it, I mean, I definitely think there are lots of ways to reframe some of that. And I think it's the way to do that is it starts with really, I call it taking captive every thought, which is something I got from the Bible, but disciplining our minds to not go there, I think, is one of the best ways that we can start. And when you start to, you know, check yourself, or if you can learn to start to check yourself whenever like negative thoughts creep in, you can turn those around. So an example would be if you feel jealousy when you're looking at social media, like, oh man, she's so skinny or whatever, just turn it around like, oh, you know, I should compliment her for that, you know, instead of wishing you had it yourself, like calling out the good in others, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's such great advice. I mean, you know, we're living in this time period where things have changed so rapidly. We don't have a manual for how to deal with the way the world has kind of infiltrated our lives. I mean, you think like 10 or 15 years ago, you would see ads, you know, on TV or a magazine or maybe a billboard, but you could avoid all of those. But now it's on our phones. We're seeing it all day long through the accounts that we follow. So yeah, I definitely think that's great advice to, you know, either set boundaries or to find a way to turn that around and to see it in a positive light. That's so good.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, so we're, you know, mostly through January, which is crazy. It's crazy that we're like almost through the first month of the year. Yeah. And, you know, I always set resolutions, or I like to think of them more as goals or intentions for my year. And I know probably other people listening have as well. And so what do you recommend for keeping to those? I mean, is there a strategy, or, you know, what are your thoughts on that?
So One thing that I am coming across in my research and writing the book about heart goals is, and it's not even, it's this idea that it's more than the idea of, we're setting goals wrong. I mean, we are not setting goals the right way, but um, maybe we shouldn't even be setting goals at all. One of the things that I am thinking about doing is, instead of calling the book Heart Goals, which is currently the working title. So this is information that may go nowhere after this podcast, but it's an interesting little behind the scenes thing. So I'm thinking about calling it Heart Habits, because when we set resolutions, normally they're very outcome oriented. I want to lose 10 pounds, or I want to go climb Mount Everest, or I want to learn French. And when we say those things, we're really not, it's kind of just a nice thing. And we're really not stopping to think about the process. We're not thinking about the journey. We're not thinking about what it's going to take to lose 10 pounds. And I'll even have people, I do surveys every now and then on my Instagram account, or I'll throw out a question. And one of the things people tell me about goal setting is they have trouble breaking their goals down. And so in my research, I'm kind of asking these questions like, well, what if we didn't have to break them down? What if we just started focusing on who we want to become from a place, from a place of identifying what we need? If we want to become someone who is fit, why are we focusing on losing 10 pounds? If we want to, when we focus on who we're becoming instead of that end destination, what we have become, when we focus on the journey more than the end destination, it's easier to take the steps. It's easier to identify what the next step needs to be. So an example of this would be, if you were going to, flip the, I want to lose 10 pounds, like what's it going to take to get there on a daily basis? A salad, like simply like one salad a day. Like that is a step in the right direction. That is, if I can get that habit down, then I can build another one on top of that. And maybe by the end of this year, I'll have lost 10 pounds. And so it's almost like the way to keep the resolution is not even to start thinking about the resolution in the first place, but look at what you need to do on a daily basis in order to become the kind of person that would be able to achieve that resolution.
Yeah, wow. I love that so much. I know so many people are disillusioned with setting resolutions and they say, I'm not even going to set them at all. But I feel like that process that you just described is so much more appealing and easier in a sense to actually implement in a very real way in our days.
Mm-hmm. And here's something else that's interesting for your listeners. I'm sure you've probably seen like a habit tracker someplace in your life. Maybe it's in the back of a planner, or you printed one off, you found one on Pinterest or something like that. And normally those are like, track a habit for 30 days, and you just put a little X and you try to do it 30 days in a row, right? There's new research out. I'm reading this book called Atomic Habits right now.
Yes.
Have you read it?
I haven't, but it's in my Kindle. It's on my next book to read. So I'm curious to hear what you have to say.
So good. So I learned this from this book. It's actually not how many days in a row you do something. It's the frequency. It's how often you do it. It has the amount of time between actions does not matter so much as the actual actions themselves. So if I'm trying to create a habit of a salad a day, it doesn't matter if I actually do it daily. What matters is how frequently I am reprogramming my brain and carving new neural pathways about salads.
Yeah.
So when I read that, I was so encouraged. I was like, I'm going to eat 2 salads a day. I mean,
right.
Like, my brain
take it to the next level.
Loves salads. Yeah.
Right.
Next level. Like, Like
Oh.
he just told me I could get to a new habit or a new way of thinking faster. Anyway, I love that.
That's incredible because, like you said, I've always thought, 30 days, you have to, do something. That's why there's, the whole 30 because, we think, okay, we need the 30
Right.
days to set the new habit. But I love that it's more the frequency that matters. That's definitely, I feel like, a game changer.
Sorry. Even back to that resolutions question, like if you're trying to do a whole 30, what if your resolution was just to do 30 days out of 365? Like what if we look at the resolutions differently and still call that a success? So anyway, just something else for
Yeah.
people to think about.
No, I think that's great too because, I think when we set these kind of resolutions, we're like, I'm going to change overnight and it's going to be fast and I'm going to be a completely different person in a matter of weeks. And, like what you're saying is lasting change has to be sustained over time and it has to become a habit. And so it could happen overnight. Maybe if we did eat 3 salads a day, but
Right.
but it is nice to give yourself room to grow into the person that you want to become.
Yeah. Yeah. You would have to do like 3 salads a day for at least 10 days to get that overnight change, I guess. And he doesn't actually he talks about the frequency of taking that action, but he doesn't actually give a number of actions that you need to take for that to be ingrained, that new habit to be ingrained in your mind. But I don't know about you, but I'm almost getting to this point where if it is instant change or a quick fix, I don't trust it. I definitely don't trust it if a marketer is saying that this is going to happen for me overnight. But I'm learning to, even when I map out my own plans, I'm starting to question if anything is happening too rapidly, it might not be the best way of going about it. It might not be the thing that sticks. So it's almost like we just need to have more patience with ourselves if we're trying to achieve that stuff and not expect that same instant response of ourselves as we do from, the products that marketers are trying to sell us.
Yes, yes. And I think seeing ourselves as real people with real lives, we aren't part of that marketing machine. And so what we're seeing in our media it's not real. It's not real life. And so being able to separate the two and giving ourselves grace to grow on our own schedule, I think is going to be a lot longer lasting than something that's, we're trying to make happen too quickly.
Yeah.
Something else that we hear a lot about, we get emails on is like, how do we stay organized? How do we plan for our days and keep up with that? And so do you have any practical recommendations for someone who maybe has never used a planner before, maybe has very disorganized days and has no idea where to start? What would you say would be a first step?
I mean, the first step is actually decluttering in like a mental and physical way. Like both you have to declutter your schedule. You have to declutter. If you are finding yourself overwhelmed, it starts the way out of that overwhelm is decluttering tangible and intangible things. And decluttering my physical space is something that I'm still working on. I come from a long line of hoarders on both sides, and I try to operate by the rule, one thing in, 2 things out, which doesn't always. I mean, right after Christmas, I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to. Like
So hard.
the issue with abundance. So, but I do believe that our physical space. I mean, if we're going to talk about, cohesive home, our physical space can significantly, our environment can contribute to our mental capacity. And then when we start to need to declutter our schedules and our brain space, I mean, one thing that I think overwhelms a lot of us is stuff that we don't even think about, like the mental. I've heard it referred to as this is not my term, but mental load of what we're carrying. And the mental load is things that aren't on our planners, but are just at the back of our mind. Like, oh, my kid outgrew his tennis shoes. He needs to get another pair. Or, you know, it's, and maybe that eventually ends up on a to-do list, but there are a lot of even habits that, you know, making school lunches for my kids, like it's, or ordering school lunches. We're not making school lunches right now, but we have to remember once a month to order them. And
oh, nice. Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, it's stuff like that we end up carrying more than we realize. And so in decluttering, another, like a second step would be getting it out of your head and onto paper. So recognizing that we need to write things down. And even, you know, there are times whenever I've made fun of myself for writing down so many tiny things, like a supplement regimen. Instead of just in my planner, instead of take my supplements, it's been like, have I had the vitamin? Have I had the vitamin D3? Have I had the cranberry? You know, and I've got like a list of 12 supplements or something, just because I'm trying to get my body back to a healthy state after an illness or something like that. But writing down all that stuff keeps us from having to carry it around in our head, and we can start to make space for other stuff. And then the last thing I would say on that is like keeping the space there and not filling it back up, both, and again, back to like the physical and mental environments, and not saying, oh, I've got a little blank spot in my schedule here. That means I can now go volunteer at my kid's school. Like we need to leave that white space on our calendars, you know?
Oh, yeah, that is such good advice. I know I'm guilty of that. I'm like, ooh, I just cleared this, you know, time block, or my home is looking very minimalist and neat. And then I just like almost subconsciously, I'm like, oh, I have to add more, you know, and I don't know if it's just a cultural thing to always be adding more and doing more and being more. It is very hard to just rest in that white space and being still.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I do think it's a cultural thing. I think it goes back to, I mean, this good old American dream and marketers trying to sell us stuff. I think it's the result of, and that stuff's not bad. I'm trying to sort through this right now for my book. So I think it's so interesting that you said all that. Because I want to give my readers like a really clear, solid action plan for how to deal with that.
I think it's going to be an incredible guide. I am so excited to actually get my hands on it. So do you have a publishing date?
No, I have an agent. That's all I have right now.
Ooh,
so
okay.
And he was an editor for he's acting like an editor right now for me. He was an editor in a former life, former career. So anyway, it's a lot of back and forth. I really love the process. So it's super fun it's something I enjoy. So that's exciting for me.
Well, cannot wait to get our hands on it. So Whitney, where can our listeners find you and find out more about Heart Goals and everything that you are offering or you have to offer?
The best place is to follow me on Instagram, which is at Whitney English. And from there, you can follow the link in my profile to visit my blog. And I talk about all kinds of things. So I love making a home for my family, and I'm really into skincare right now. So I talk about these life hacks that I fight through on my own and then just really enjoy sharing. So I would say Instagram.
Yeah, it's a great place to start. And I think too, it's, you know, I love your account because it's real, it's inspiring, but it's also very real and authentic. And so definitely I will put links to your website and your Instagram and all of that in our show notes. And I think I'll probably also throw in a few episode links for decluttering and simplifying your schedule, because I think after listening to this episode, people are going to be like, okay, I'm ready to, get the ball rolling on those things.
I hope so. That's awesome.
Absolutely. Well, Whitney, thank you so much for joining me on the Cohesive Home podcast. It was such a pleasure to talk with you.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you again to Whitney English for joining us on the Cohesive Home podcast. Be sure to head to whitneyenglish.com to get on the list for the next release of the Heart Goals workbook, and also find her on Instagram at Whitney English. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.